Hello and welcome to Coach Connect Live. So glad to be here with all of you today and to see you tuning in from around the country and the world. My name is Eloïse Eonnet. I am the director of Coach Connect at the Muse and Fairygodboss. And I am so glad to be joined today by one of our wonderful coaches, Joy Lin. Joy, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Eloise. Hello, everyone.
Today's event is sponsored by Morgan Stanley, who was particularly drawn to today's topic of strategies for parents who are looking to return to the workforce. And they're actually also actively hiring for some really interesting jobs. We're going to be putting 2 links to their jobs in the chat today, so look out for those. And I also encourage you to check out all of the other jobs they're actively hiring for on the Muse and Fairygodboss, especially if you're a parent returning to work. But of course, all are welcome to check those out. Also today, I encourage everyone to ask your questions in the chat, comment on what we're saying, share your experience. We love seeing those comments come in, and we'll spend as much time as we possibly can today answering your questions. So put those in the chat. We're going to be looking out for those and spending a good chunk of time today addressing as many as we can. So before we jump into today's topic, Joy, I'd love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to our audience a little bit. Would you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Eloise. Hi, everyone. I'm just checking in the chat here and just want to see where everyone's from. Yeah, I love that people are tuning in from all over, the world and the States here. So I am, overall, I am a champion for career changers, for career development, and for those who are seeking clarity in their careers. I started off in my own career in public accounting after graduation and was able to make a career jump into the music industry purely off of cold outreach. And it inspired me so much. And, it made such a big difference in my own personal and professional development to do that and go through that and build those skills. It made me very inspired to double down on career development. So I ended up working with clients all over the world since then for over a decade now, in career clarity, career changes, job searching, all of those things. I joined the Muse at its launch in 2015, and I haven't looked back. It's been amazing. They're an incredible company and partner. I actually took a leave in 2022 to 2024 to get back into being a full-time employee and to start a family. So I have an 8-month-old now. And so this topic is particularly timely and really perfect for me to dive into today. So thank you guys for all being here.
Yeah, thank you, Joy. We're so thrilled to have you sharing your expertise and experience in the matter. So you work with clients through the Muse and Fairygodboss every single day who are looking to take the next step in their career, whether it's internally within their organization or figuring out what those next steps are and putting those next steps into action. Many people come to us who are looking to return to the workforce after taking a short leave to start a family or a longer leave to care for family. I'm curious kind of what your thoughts and ideas are around this topic when you talk to your clients, and some strategies that you share with them as they're preparing for and actually engaging in that return to the workforce.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, Eloise. I mean, it's such a honor, I think, to be a parent. I think that's one thing to really just throw out there. I've, as you've mentioned, I've worked with clients that have taken extended amount of time out of their professional lives to raise families, and to jump in, it takes a lot of guts. It takes, it takes effort, and there's a lot that goes into it. So I've really been able to work with them to create more of a framework, to help them get back into the game and build those skills and to feel really good about it. So um, you know, I'd love to maybe just jump into the slides if we can pop them up here. Thank you so much. Yeah, so, I wanted to talk really briefly about just what the trends are looking right now, because, things change every single year. Um, right now, more than 25% of mothers return to work within 2 months of giving birth. So that's a very short amount of time that they have to recover and to get back into it. And there's a big transition at play. Also, only about a quarter of American workers have access to paid parental leave, and that's for both men and women. So there's certainly a gap that needs to be filled, oftentimes, and even for those who don't necessarily want to return to work right away, there has been also more pressure. Financial security, really just making sure your professional life is still going. And then more than 70% of American fathers also return to work full time less than 2 weeks after the birth of their child, which means, again, there's um, that pressure, for financial security, and then to balance then the new responsibilities of a growing household, and you know and the time you want to spend, with your children. And lastly, 58% of stay-at-home parents have taken actually more time away from work than expected, and 39% took a lot more time out of their careers than expected. And that, I believe, that represents a lot of the people who took an extended amount of time, um, and they might have already been out of the workforce for 7 to 10 years at this point. So the statistics, go back 10 years ago when they thought they would probably just be out for a few months or maybe a year or two. And now it's been a lot more time. So, yeah, so, I think there's kind of two main groups I see here. There's one, those who are returning from leave. So there's an expectation of returning back to a job that you already know you have, and how to make that transition work now that your life is completely different. And then there's the categories of people who are returning back to work after an extended amount of time. So you might be looking for a new job. You might not even know what you want to do because the work that you did prior, maybe it's not that exciting for you anymore. Maybe the industry has changed. There's so many reasons why you have to realign with the job market. So I've worked, again, I've worked with those who have taken extended amount of time away from work. And so I've seen that, up close and personal. And then now as a returning mom to a job that I had, it, I can add a little bit of that personal um, knowledge, and experience about what that transition has been like. So yeah, the main reasons why people return, number one is needing the income. As everything becomes more and more expensive, of course, we all need that financial security, especially raising children. And then two, I enjoy working and want to get back to my profession. A lot of us, we truly enjoy having that outlet. Work is something that we enjoy. We enjoy cultivating those skills, mastering different things, interacting with people. And then lastly, my kids are less dependent now. So maybe when the kids are a little bit older, you feel like this is the right time, to get back into it, to maybe take some time for yourself and think about what it is that you want to do. And then on top of that, there are a lot of other benefits of returning to work. Um, of course, the financial security, and then the career development piece, like we talked about, but also the mental well-being, being able to have that balance. And then the social interaction as well, having coworkers and colleagues and peers and expanded networks that are built in to what you do every single day, for however many hours, that can be extremely beneficial in the long term. And then having that structured schedule, as hectic, as chaotic as it can be, ends up being, a positive thing for many of us. I know for myself, if I don't have the structure, it's, up not getting done. So the structure has actually been a benefit for myself and for some others that I've talked to as well. And lastly is the positive impact on children. Having parents who are engaged with their work, engaged with the community, building skills and constantly, learning, that can demonstrate a really strong way of life and habits, for children. So yeah, as much as, it might suck to get back to work so quickly after having children, there are certain benefits, and it's important to remember that too. So I'm going to just talk about 3 steps that, I've led my clients through, and then myself through, recently. And the first one is to stay engaged. So a lot of people who are out of the workforce, one of the best ways to stay engaged with your profession and with the labor market is to stay in contact with your colleagues and coworkers. Even if you think that you'll just be out for a year or two, you're still figuring out the schedules. Um, in your household, staying in contact is one of the best ways, whether that's by LinkedIn, whether it's by text, whether that's by email or phone. There's so many different ways now to stay engaged. It does not have to mean an hour phone call. All right. I've had walking chats with people, just quickly on a walk, pull them up. I've also There have been colleagues that my clients have stayed in touch with purely by text and purely by email, and that has been enough. Um, it's about the content of what you say, not how often and how much time and effort you have to put into it. Also, keeping up with industry or professional news is important. So, depending on which industries you're in, just I think identifying the top three. You don't have to, again, try to cover all of your bases. You're trying to find something that gives you enough information to stay on top of the current events, the trends, the challenges, the concerns, and to also stimulate your own mind with them. You'll find that simply by doing that, you will be problem solving, you'll be thinking of new ideas, and staying curious. Another way to stay engaged is to follow career related experts on social media. Um, TikTok is great, LinkedIn is awesome, Instagram, Facebook, whichever way that you prefer. YouTube, um, whether it's long form content, short form, funny clips, it's all engagement. And sometimes it's those tidbits again that you take and you do with what however you want. You can go on a deep dive, or you could just take that and save it in your back pocket for another day to think about. But again, just keeps you on top of the pulse of the industry and what people are saying and doing. Finally, learning new technology and software is incredibly important because it's changing so quickly. And I think the biggest challenge I've seen for clients moving back into the workforce after an extended amount of time is diving back into the new landscape, the software that's being used at every company, the technology, AI, ChatGPT, SEO, right? There's so many different acronyms now. And this is the perfect time to dive into it. Even brushing up on your Excel skills, the basics is so important because those skills will always be needed. And the more that you can stay on top of it, the more confident you are. And the more confident you are, the more you can, really present yourself the way that you want when you're out there in job searching. And then finally, set job alerts. That's one of, a passive way to just stay on top of what people are actually hiring for. And yeah, just going through the feed, looking through some of the postings out there, even if you're employed, because you never know how things will change or if something will stand out to you and maybe is a better fit for you. Um, and just by knowing what the qualifications and what those um, main keywords and skills that are needed for the jobs that you are interested in, it gives you ideas for what kind of software to learn, what kinds of industry blogs to follow up on, and what kind of colleagues you really want to keep engaged with. Now, the second step after that engagement is to prepare. So this is that middle part, the transition part. And for those of you guys who are going back to a job that you already have, you already know, there's going to be a discussion on what kinds of schedules are going to work best. So for those who have jobs that have a little bit of that flexibility, this is a good time to think about if you want a part-time schedule to ramp up towards something. Maybe you start off part-time for the first month, and then it helps you get back into the full-time work. Um, Maybe you want to try like a 980 schedule where you're working, Monday through Thursday, 10 hours a week, and then you get every other Friday off. Um, you may want to find different ways to do work from home, right? Your remote work, breaking up the days in different ways. There's so many different combinations, I guess, that we can all work with now, depending again on how flexible, your work environment is. But it's a good time to think about it and to prepare if you need to talk to your manager or to submit a request. And yeah, the earlier the better. If you have that kind of relationship with your direct supervisor, that's a good time to talk about it, or with human resources. Um, but if not, I know that at least for me, when I was on maternity leave, I actually wasn't even allowed to access my work email. So I had to bookmark that conversation and plan for it, once I did get back. And so I just knew that there were going to be 2 weeks that was going to be pretty rough to get started. Yeah. And then also joining meetings leading up to returning. This was actually an advice that was given to me by another mom who returned while I was pregnant. So it was great to think about that. Again, because I couldn't actually join based on my company's policies, I didn't do this, but I know other people who have, and that was really helpful. Even just sitting into a staff meeting every single week leading up, you start to get brushed up again on what's happening on the team, who's joined, any changes that have happened, what are the most pressing priorities they're working on now. Of course, childcare, it's important to really consider what the options are and to set aside your childcare arrangements and also have some backups. I think it's important to, um, yeah, set up, maybe even talk to other friends or parents around the area, see if they have nannies that you guys could share, if there are daycares they recommend. Um, and then, of course, tapping into your friends, your family, just figuring out what that looks like because last minute things do happen. Um, and you want to make sure that you have some options set up. Also, you want to align expectations, with all these people. You want to make sure that these are discussed and communicated and particular scenarios are already, yeah, have already, been fleshed out so that no one is caught off guard or expected to take on something more than they can. And that's something that will have to be constant. I think with childcare there's a constant expectation alignment that needs to keep happening. So whether that's setting aside every week to just say, hey, well, how did it go this week? Is this still working for you? Then you know how you can adjust and if you need to tap into some of that backup. Choosing a start date is also really important because you want to choose a start date that hopefully can give you a little bit of a ramp up period. Um, Diving right in sometimes is a bit abrupt. So you might want to choose something before holidays. Certain holidays come up, so that way you have a couple like 3-day weeks, or there's an extended, winter holiday that's going to come up anyways. That's a good time also. Even starting just in the middle of the week is helpful because then on a Wednesday you start and then you got your Thursday and Friday, and then you have a weekend again to readjust and transition. And finally, setting boundaries. This is for yourself and at work, and personally, you want to know at this point in your life, what are your boundaries? What are you no longer willing to do? Um, how if for example you used to work overtime every once in a while, or it would be okay to leave work, even 10 minutes or 15 minutes later. But now it's just not an option. That's a boundary you need to set. And then you need to really, you know, figure out, well, how can I make sure I stay within these boundaries? Do I need to say no to things? Do I need to, continuously have alignment discussions with managers, with, the team? Do you need to delegate more? Um, or do you need to maybe switch your work style a little bit? Another tip that I was given during my pregnancy, and I refer to that because this is the most recent for me, was that, at work, instead of having meetings and discussions and then just having to remember it all in your head because you're quite frankly juggling so many things at that point, having your staff write you emails, like making that a thing. It's something like, okay, yeah, and would you mind to just send me an email listing out the things that we just discussed and what, we decided. That way you always have documentation. You don't have to write it yourself, and neither do you have to just remember it in your head. And then for those of you guys on the job search, this is a really important time for you to clarify what it is that you're interested in. You want to start reaching out as early as possible, to your contacts, to colleagues, anyone really in your community that you have been engaged with, that know you well. Um, Even networking groups on like Facebook and LinkedIn. There's a few on like working moms or working parents. Going to mom or dad meetups. Those are all places that you can really just reconnect with people, have these informational chats, start to put the feelers out there. And then, of course, you want to update your materials. So you're going to want to strategize, how do I present myself in this phase of my life? How do I explain if there are any sort of gaps? And again, you want to see, how could I kind of weave together a story to emphasize my professional goals, my professional skills, and what I bring to the table. You know, um, it's important to go and update your LinkedIn, optimize it, make sure you have the right keywords, you have all, you have a updated profile picture, you have an about section that has your voice, your personality, and then you have your work experience, whether it's before you went on leave or if you did some part-time jobs during it. You want to make sure it's updated and it tells a little bit of a story of where you want to go next. Lastly, there are returner programs at major companies like Dell or Spectrum, Boeing, and there are these are returnship programs where companies support returning parents. And so, I think a few of those other companies, and I think I wrote them down here. Yeah, UBS, Credit Suisse, and I'm sure there are a few more out there, but these are companies that support parents coming back. There also, I think I saw another article, yeah, by the Muse about, companies that are supporting parents returning, or supporting parents in general, whether that's with maternity leave, paternity leave, disability leave, childcare, on-site childcare, all sorts of things. So now that we're in a different stage of life, it's important to think about, well, even if I do have a job, maybe there's a place that is a little bit more supportive of what's needed now. And lastly is the transition. So this is, once you're in it, you're in the new job, you're going on interviews, you're back at the job, um, at home, of course, you want to really nail down those morning routines, morning routines, those evening routines, because that's the time you get with your family, with your little ones. It's also the time where you prep and prepare things for the week or the next day or for childcare. And then also time that, you're dealing with things that are last minute or unexpected. So you always want to give yourself grace to know that some days you may just have to call in sick. And, I've had those days where it's like, I'm taking PTO this day because that's what's needed. Um, and continuously again realigning with the household, with your support systems and your community. And then of course at work, this is, like I said, a transition, getting back. It's important when you do get back to work to start thinking about your professional development plan, because you are, you have um, a family and things you really want to do, at home. It's important to make the most out of the time that you are putting into your professional life. So those 8 hours or whatever hours that you're doing, having a professional development plan allows you to know where you're trying to go. What's your goal? What are you working towards? And so having that makes it a lot more meaningful, especially in those days where it's really hard or there's a lot going on. At least you know what the goal is, what you're, aiming towards. And then lastly is self-care. It's so important to really set aside activities, time with your friends, family, just all the things that really give you inspiration, some rest and rejuvenation. um, Even if that's 10 minutes, if it's 10-minute walk one day and another day it's a hot coffee, another day maybe you're able to arrange some childcare and you get 5 hours to yourself. you know we love it. So you really want to inject that in as much as possible. Something I know people have really enjoyed is having like a self-care basket or a list or something where it's like, you don't have to think about it. You just don't have time anymore. So as soon as you have that moment, you go to your basket, you grab that book, or you grab, that tea packet, whatever it is, you turn on that music, um, or you go to that list. You're like, okay, I'm going to go to this mall and I'm going to go on this walk. That's my, 1 hour. So make sure you have that self-care because it's really important that you have that time to yourself. All right, well, those are my main tips for today. So just want to say thank you. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn, and I really look forward to the conversation and the discussion that we're going to have.
Yeah, Joy, thank you so much. You covered so many important pieces, and I know that each of those bullet points is like an hour-long conversation to dive into, right? So you did a really nice job of giving us an overview here, and I know I've seen from the response in the chat, people are really connecting to it. So thank you. We have a bunch of questions that came in. So I want to just go straight to those and answer as many as we can today. Let me pick and choose here. First of all, Nikki mentioned that she's 2 days into returning to work. So congrats, Nikki. That wasn't a question, but congrats to you. I hope that today was helpful as you're transitioning back in. But let me go to a few questions here. Jasmine says, thank you so much for hosting this event. Excited to be a part of the discussion. I'd love to hear your thoughts on return to work programs and if returnship is a good option for an experienced employee who has taken a 5-year career pause to start a family. So Joy, you talked about this a little bit. Is it something that you recommend across the board to people who have also taken extended leaves and have a lot of experience? What's your take on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. My answer would be it depends. I think every company has a slightly different program, the way that it's laid out. The questions I think I would have for you would be, you know, what um, what kind of skills, are the most needed or valuable in the areas you want to get back into, and is that something you can already reflect on your resume? Because if we can do that, then you can really strategically find opportunities out there that don't have returnship programs. So, I would say like I would keep your options as expanded as possible. Yeah, 5 years, I'm sure a lot has happened since then. The world has changed, the industries have changed, but um, I have a feeling that you can really get on top of that really quickly. So yeah, I would look into the programs. I would, consider it, but again, it's something that these companies want to offer to entice great talent. And if you're a great talent, I would say just, yeah, keep your options open. Look at those companies, but also look at the rest too. See what's going to work for you, and really focus on that networking piece. If you do find companies you're interested in, put them on a top companies list and start digging around for old contacts or new outreach. People in these companies that you resonate with. Start some conversations, start putting it out into your community or your networks that you're interested in learning more and just having some more informational and discussions with folks, and then I would see how that goes.
Yeah, I think that's great. And going back to what you were saying, Joy, as well, it's like your needs have changed after having a family than from before. And so identifying what those needs are is also really important in this transition. And places like the Muse and Fairygodboss are great to find those jobs that or those companies that check those boxes for you, right? So and a company that has these programs is going to be very welcoming, hopefully, probably, most likely, to returning parents and to people with families, right? So, yeah, great. Thank you so much. A few more questions. We might go a few minutes over time, but I want to definitely get one or two answers in here. We have a question from Claire. What are some options for including job titles in resume and LinkedIn for 5+ year caregiving leave, right? So this is a question we get a lot from returning parents. What do you do with that time on your resume and on LinkedIn? Claire wants to avoid immediate judgments from potential recruiters who see significant employment gaps. It's a true struggle, she says.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. You're not alone in that. I've worked with so many people with that, with 5-year gaps, 10-year gaps even. So what we really start to work on is filling in those gaps. And even if you don't have anything necessarily put in for those 5 years, we can start now. And so a few options, to get started is to do a little bit of volunteer work. You might even start to find different projects to do part-time or just freelance. Again, using the skills that you want to enter the job market with again. Those are some strategies that we've found to fill in those gaps. I have seen it done well where people put, like a section on their LinkedIn where they talk about their sabbatical or their leave, but they even within that they talk about how they've stayed on top of their professional development in some way. So I think if you don't have anything to put right now, that's okay, but right now is the time to start thinking, well, okay, maybe I need to let's look into Coursera. Is there a free course I can take just to brush up on something? yeah, and thinking about other ways to get started, get involved, get a contract role, anything to really get something more present onto your resume, because then that's what you can talk about these interviews.
Yeah, even volunteer work, community work, right? Using those skill
Mhm.
sets doesn't have to necessarily be in your industry for you to be able to mention that you've been developing those specific skill sets, right? So
Yeah.
options there. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's so
yeah.
many questions that came in, but there's one that I want to finish with today because I think it's what a lot of people feel, not everyone. Um, but Priya asks, when returning to the workforce, what should you do if you're experiencing imposter syndrome and the fear of failure?
Mm. Oh, that gnarly imposter syndrome.
That
Yeah.
thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know. It's unavoidable. It's unavoidable. It's good to just accept it. Accept that, we're always going to feel like we're not completely there. Um, well, I think there's two important things to remind yourself on. One is to really slow down what your thoughts are going on in your head. Um, because oftentimes you're going to realize like, oh wow, that those thoughts are really mean, or they're really critical, and they're not necessarily true. They're they're there doing its thing, um, trying to protect you, right, from doing something that they think is something scary. So imposter syndrome um, is something we can manage. I would definitely recommend, if you go onto YouTube or something, looking up some positive affirmations. There's some really great, like 30-minute ones you could just put on your commute. You can put as you're brushing your teeth in the morning. It's just a really easy way to get started on that. But the next thing you really want to start thinking about are what excites you, what do you want to learn more about, what are you curious about. Really changing those questions in your mind to something that you can run with, and start to really think about, well, what does interest you, rerouting those thoughts into something positive and into something productive for yourself. I bet you'll have a list of things that you want to learn, things you're just curious about, things you want to do during your free time and at work. Those are the lists and the thoughts that I want you to focus on, because that's what's going to create a completely new experience. Um, and the imposter syndrome, those comments, those thoughts will always be there, but you'll be able to see it in a more compassionate light. You'll be like, yeah, of course, you're getting back, to a job. There's so much going on. Of course, you're not going to feel like you're 100% confident. And the more that you see that compassion, the more you'll notice around yourself, like, oh yeah, we're all feeling this way. And more you talk to other parents, there's so many different scenarios that we have to go through, and everyone's has their own brand, I guess, of imposter syndrome. But yeah, definitely working on those thoughts, rerouting them into something that's positive, productive, and curiosity driven for yourself, and talking to others about it. Finding those support groups, talking to other parents.
Yeah, that's such great feedback on that, Joy. And I think also going back to what you said earlier about boundaries, uh, I think that also just putting yourself in the driver's seat of figuring out like what are those boundaries for yourself, and those boundaries will probably change, and they have definitely changed since before parenthood. And giving yourself permission to clarify those for yourself and for others can also help, right? Find that place and feel good about what you're doing and feel like you're not doing less than you should be doing because you have to clarify those things for yourself. Yeah. Um, Joy, thank you so much for walking us through this wonderful plan, these ideas, these steps that people can take to get organized and feel confident going back into the workforce. There's so many more questions that we don't have time to get to, unfortunately, but thank you everyone for asking them. Bring them to the Fairy Godboss community, ask them there. We will get back to you. So please repost them there. We will be posting this video, this recording to the Fairy Godboss page for the event and also on YouTube. So feel free to come back and watch it again, revisit it, spend time with it, and build your plan. Joy, thank you again so much for your time and expertise today.
Thank you, Eloise, and thank you everyone for joining, and thanks for having me at this discussion.
Yeah, wonderful. Have a good day, everyone. See you next month.